let's just sum up Joe Biden so far. You got a tepid economy, massive debt. You've got war in the Middle East again. You got criticizing Israel for that war, even though it's a victim of it. You've got high gas prices and gas shortages. That is an incredibly quick turnaround from the way Donald Trump was running America. During the Trump presidency, there were no new wars started with America, and America actually, incredibly, oversaw and helped provide the blueprint for several Israel-Arab peace treaties, and they seem warm and genuine. For example, I learned the other day that Israel and the United Arab Emirates were creating a sort of a COVID bubble. They have so much back and forth travel now that they said, okay, if you're good in one country, you're good in the other, you don't have to quarantine. That's sort of cool. I wish we had that with our best friend, ally, neighbor, and trading partner, the United States. Wouldn't you like that? So Israel and the United Arab Emirates, I think that's in effect. I heard it was coming. I presume it was carried through on. You had 4 years of peace under Trump, and here we are 100 days into Biden, and you have the worst outbreak of violence in the region. Show me some of that footage, the rocket attacks from Gaza into Israel. And Israel has a defensive weapon system called the Iron Dome. Those are rockets and then anti-rockets. So the little explosions you see in the air are Israeli Iron Dome anti-missiles blowing up terrorist rockets in real time. It looks like fireworks, doesn't that? So this is actually footage from Avi Yamini's brother. So what are those strange things in the sky? That's called the Iron Dome system. Now, going from memory, each of those anti-rockets, those anti-missiles, cost over $100,000. And as you can see, they're thrown up there like just like rice at a wedding, right? Like confetti at a wedding. Now, they do knock down a lot of the rockets and missiles. But what's a rocket? Like, these aren't guided rockets. These aren't expensive rockets. They're just really one step above homemade. So, you know, it probably costs a few $100 to make some of these rockets, and it's $100,000 to knock them down. I guess that shows the value that Israel places on civilian life, because these rockets are not being aimed at military installments. They're being aimed at population centers. So that's Israel. It's under great attack. Here's Biden's press secretary on this. I have not seen this clip yet, but this is Joe Biden's press aide talking about the situation.
Since last week, he has directed his team to engage intensively with senior Israeli and Palestinian officials, as well as leaders throughout the Middle East. His team is communicating a clear and consistent message in support of de-escalation, and that is our primary focus. The president's support for Israel's security, for its legitimate right to defend itself, and its people is fundamental and will never waver. We condemn ongoing rocket attacks by Hamas and other terrorist groups, including against Jerusalem. We also stand against extremism that has inflicted violence on both communities. Jerusalem, a city of such importance to people of faith around the world, must be a place of coexistence. It is up to the officials, residents, and leaders to restore the city to a place of calm. The president and his team will continue to pursue the conditions for diplomacy, dialogue, and de-escalation, and protection of civilians, even as we work together with our friends to deter acts of violence and terrorism. We will also continue to support a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That is the only way to ensure the just and lasting peace that two peoples have struggled to achieve. We believe Palestinians and Israelis deserve equal measures of freedom, security, dignity, and prosperity, and U.S. officials in recent weeks have spoken candidly with Israeli officials about how evictions of Palestinian families who have lived for years, sometimes decades, in their homes, and of demolitions of these homes work against our common interests in achieving a solution to the conflict. In the coming days, as Muslims gather with family and friends to celebrate Eid, and Jews join together to mark the beginning of Shabbat, let us affirm that all people of faith deserve to enjoy these important celebrations without fear of violence and work toward peace and calm for all.
How do you, so let's say you're an Israeli civilian and those rockets are coming in. Those first rockets were over Tel Aviv. How do you de-escalate when a terrorist group called Hamas is shooting rockets at you? How do you de-escalate if you're a civilian target? I'm curious about that. One of the things she said, which I think is important, even though it sounds like boilerplate, is she said that a two-state solution, that is carving Israel up, is, quote, the only way to get peace. I don't know if you heard that. So that's the Iron Dome shooting down rockets over a modern city, looks like Tel Aviv. Is that really the only way to get peace? You know, during the Trump years, Trump said, you know, it's not the only way to get peace. Peace between Israel and Morocco doesn't depend on what the terrorists in Gaza say. Peace between Israel and Bahrain doesn't depend on it, or Israel and Sudan, or Israel and UAE. In fact, by saying you can't get peace without dealing with those terrorists, you're basically saying you don't want peace. Because Trump proved for 4 years that not only can you get peace, it is you just go and do it without listening to what the terrorists in Gaza say. The terrorists are called Hamas. Trump cut off funding to the Palestinian Authority, especially to the West Bank, to the Gaza Strip, because of the terrorism. Joe Biden restored the funding, and so now I guess with terrorists have the money, they got money for rockets. Hey, you Israelis, will you de-escalate? Let's sum up where we are after 100 days of Biden. Incredibly, you've got gas shortages in the United States. Did you see that? In the United States, gas stations are running out of gas. I saw a tweet this morning, 70% of gas stations, and I think it was in the city of Charlotte, that's a big city, are out of gas. Gas shortages? Now, I happen to know a few things about gas, gasoline, oil, refining, and things of that sort, just because I'm from Alberta and I've written 2 books on oil and gas. One was called Ethical Oil, the case for Canada's oil sands. The other was called Groundswell, the case for fracking. Greenboro, I thought it was Charlotte. Oh, it's everywhere. Greenboro, North Carolina, 25-car line to get gas, 45-minute wait. There's a ton of those. Type in, I thought I read Charlotte. Type in Charlotte gas in Twitter, because I thought I read that like 70% of gas stations there are out of gas. How do you have a gas station out of gas? And how do you do that? I know how that happened. Imagine what's NYS, I don't know what that is, had a gas shortage, breaking 71% of gas stations in Charlotte, North Carolina area out of fuel, 71%. Charlotte, Mecklenburg police are calling the situation a gas crisis and have requested that all non-essential travel be avoided. Really? Now, what I've learned in my studies about fracking, oil sands, refineries, stuff like that, is that particularly under Trump, America has become energy self-sufficient, which I have to say, I wrote the book Ethical Oil about 10 years ago. I would not have imagined America would be energy self-sufficient because I wrote Ethical Oil before the fracking revolution really took hold. And you can frack for both oil and gas. So natural gas is so plentiful in the United States and so cheap that it's, it is the preferred fuel for so many uses in homes, but also in power plants, by the way. It's so cheap that it's replacing coal, which is why America has reduced its carbon dioxide emissions more than any other country, if you care about that sort of thing. It wasn't some global warming regulation that did it. It was the fracking revolution that made natural gas so cheap, and natural gas replaces coal, and it's less carbon intensive. The second thing is you can frack oil. And so oil is refined into gasoline. We say gas, I'm going to get some gas. That's just short for gasoline. You're not putting natural gas in your car, you're putting gasoline. That comes from oil. So in both natural gas, which you use to heat your home, natural gas stove, there are some natural gas vehicles, not many, lots of power plant uses, and gasoline, which comes from oil, both of which come from fracking. America has never produced more. It takes a special genius to spike the price of gasoline to a 7-year high, I think, and actually have shortages. So let's just sum up Joe Biden so far. You got a tepid economy, massive debt. You've got war in the Middle East again. You got criticizing Israel for that war, even though it's a victim of it. You've got high gas prices and gas shortages. That is an incredibly quick turnaround from the way Donald Trump was running America.
Oh, hi friends. What you just saw there is a clip from our Rebel News daily live stream show. It's fun, it's fast, and it's completely unscripted, so you never really know what you're going to get. Just go to rebelnews.com/livestream